What's up, guys, and welcome to this third installment of early game strategy videos on the major powers in Global War 1936. Today is going to be all about the Japanese. Now, fortunately, the Japanese don't have any subsidiaries, so today's video structure is going to be easy. We're just going to go first into tech and a little chat about tech, and then I'm going to talk about early game moves and strategies and what those entail. All right, let's go. Alright, let's talk about some Japanese tech. Now, Japanese tech, I think, is going to be a little more subjective than other major powers. You've got a lot of options and not a ton of major factories to get what you want to get done. First off, I'm going to assume that you've got 2 tech rolls per turn. Upgrading that factory in Honshu up to a major on the first turn is, I think, kind of a must for Japan. You can also build a major in Kyushu if you'd like. I'll discuss that later, but I usually don't. It's really up to you. So, and even if you do, it's going to take a while to get done. So I'm going to assume that we've got 2 tech rolls per turn. And I think there's a pretty obvious first 2 that you should be getting in this first tier. Wartime economy and improved construction are, in my opinion, hands down the best 2 techs for Japan to get. Obviously, wartime economy is free money, and that's going to be the best tech for every major power. And improved construction makes your boats so much cheaper. Like, it makes a huge difference if you're getting that extra 2 or 3 militia or infantry a turn from improved construction. It really makes a very big difference for Japan. So I think those are hands down the first 2 techs you should get. Now, in your second tier of techs, there's a little more options for you here. So I'm going to just start from the top and go to the bottom. Advanced artillery are going to be good. I think they're really good in like mainland China, where there's a lot of terrain, so they're going to be, you don't need to be as fast, and artillery generally aren't as affected by terrain modifiers as other units, such as advanced mechs and heavy armors. Those jungles are going to be nasty for them. So I like advanced artillery, and advanced artillery is also good for amphibious assaults. Now, generally, it's going to be mostly infantry and then your planes on your amphibious assaults, but later on in the game, if you happen to get attack transports, advanced artillery is going to be really good for those amphibious assaults. And I'll just move on to attack transports here while we're talking about it. They're, depending on how the game is going, they can be an excellent tool for the Japanese to use. But if you're like me and you like to get your islands pretty quickly, so those American islands on the fringe, it's going to be too late. You're not going to really need attack transports unless you lose your foothold in China somehow, which the way that I play Japan, I usually have a pretty strong foothold in China. So I don't necessarily need attack transports as the Japanese, but if you are waiting until the very end game to try to snatch those islands from the Americans and the British, then absolutely attack transports are going to be a great tool for you. Next up is long-range aircraft. I think this one is awesome for the Japanese because they have so many planes and so many sea zones to cover. Sea zones really slow your planes down and makes it tough to get them where they need to go. So long-range aircraft is going to be awesome. And that +1 maritime air patrol on your medium bombers, is going to be good if you've got a sub problem from the British and Americans. Next up, heavy battleships and heavy carriers. Now these are just fun. You know, I don't think you actually need them that much, but I love to research them anyway, just because they're fun. I think probably heavy carrier is going to be a better unit, but I don't have a strong opinion on that. I love them both. I like to research them both, and they're both very fun. So in this second tier, it's really up to how the game is going. If you're doing really well and you have improved construction super early, then do it. Go for those heavy battleships. You know, the Japanese tech is a little bit subjective, so it's up to you. Beyond these first 2, I really think that those are the best 2 techs for the Japanese. And beyond that, it's up to you. And just go get it and have fun as the Japanese. All right, let's move on to some early game moves. All right, let's talk about some Japan early game moves. So in the very early game, there's usually going to be two paths that you can go down. One of them is going to be to invade China early, and then the second is going to be to invade the Dutch East Indies early on. And this is going to be a big decision. It happens very early in the game, and it affects the entire rest of the game. I'm going to tell you right off the bat that my preference is to go into China. There's a lot of wealth there, and they actually have a player building units in there, two players actually, building units in there. So it's only going to get harder and harder to invade China unless you do it early before they're strong. The Dutch East Indies aren't going to get any extra units in there, and you don't get your bonus income from the Dutch East Indies until you're at war with a major power, which for Japan doesn't happen until pretty late in the game. You know, it'll probably be 41 or 42 before you're even at war with any other major power. So you're not going to be getting your wartime bonus income from the East Indies. And there is actually quite a bit of money to be had in China. All of these border territories are going to be worth 2, except for Hope. So you got 2 down here in, I believe this is Kwangtung. Yeah, Kwangtung. You've got 2 in Hunan. You've got 2 in Shantung. You've got 2 in Nanking. You've got 2 in Peking up here. So it can be quite lucrative to invade China. And obviously you start with a huge air force. So you're going to be just absolutely shredding through those infantry that China already has. It's not going to be a huge task to invade China usually, and you should have a very good foothold in there by the time you need to start building up Navy to compete with the United States and the Far East Command in Anzac. So it is my preference to invade China. Not everybody is going to agree with that. I just feel that you can get more money out of it, and the Dutch East Indies are always going to be there. They're not going to get any more powerful. You're always going to be able to take them out in one fell swoop. Another benefit to invading China is getting that early foothold in Nanking, which is a victory point. That's a victory city right there. So that's going to be a victory point. If you can get in there early and start fortifying it early, it's going to be tough to take it from you. And it's going to be, I don't want to say a free point, but it's going to be a point that you can very easily get. As to when to invade China, usually I do it on the second or third turn, which may seem a little bit early, but depending on what the KMT does down here, if they start going inland to try to invade Shinsi up there, the CCP, if they start pulling troops back, yeah, go ahead and hit them hard. I also like to go to Peking as a first move into Suiyuan up here. These two is a good place to take on those first turns to protect that reheat factory so they can't counterattack you. And then from there, you can start to spread down the coast. You start with 5 transports, so it's not going to be an issue to amphibiously assault. You're just going to want to build a ton of Marines on your first 2 purchases, your first 2 purchase turns. A lot of Marines, a lot of infantry. You don't necessarily need any more boats until later on in the game. You start with an absolutely bonkers navy. And you start with enough transportation. You've got your destroyers, your special destroyers, which can transport an infantry class unit, and then you've got 5 transports. You're going to be able to get enough dudes into China, and you obviously start with a massive air force too. You start with 3 fighters and 3 attack bombers. No, 4 fighters and 3 attack bombers, which is nuts. You're going to be shredding the infantry in China. They're not going to put up a good fight. So you can make pretty quick work of that eastern seaboard on China. So if you want to be looking for territories that have these ports. So Nanking obviously is a big one, very important one. Shantung up here with this major port. And then Peking in here has a minor port. You want to make sure to take those out pretty early on, so that once the U.S. gets to its peacetime income level where it can lend lease to China, You don't want them to be able to, because they can send, fighters over, which makes your life a lot more difficult. So I'd say priorities are going to be Nanking, Shantung, Peking, so that basically cuts off all aid to China. Guangdong also has a major port down here, which you need to worry about. Oh, you can't even see that. Guangdong also has a major port, which you need to worry about. So Guangdong, Nanking, Shantung, and Peking. You want to try to get those before the U.S. can start lend-leasing, because that basically cuts China off, and then they're on their own. Don't even worry about Szechuan or Kweichow if they've got units in there. They're not worth IPCs. So if you get every territory worth an IPC value, then the Chinese are just stuck. They can't make any more units, which is good. That's a very good thing for you. If the CCP hits one of the recruitment roles before you attack, you want to take care of that pretty quickly, because I've seen the CCP snowball and they can get out of hand real quick if you let them. So if they hit these northern territories on the first turn, or the northern warlord, you're going to want to get into China pretty quickly. In terms of other things, I like to, in these islands out here, just starting off in the early game, build a militia or two and upgrade some of these militia out here into infantry, just so it's a slow burn over the entire course of the game, because the Marshall Islands and the Caroline Islands are both going to help you score a victory point. So for one of the Japanese victory points, you're going to need 3 of these islands out here, and you start with 2 of them, the Carolines and the Marshalls. So if you can start to bolster these 2 in the very early game, build militia in there, maybe upgrade some of those infantry, and then in the later game send some planes out there to help protect them. You're already 2/3 of the way to that point. All you need is one other out there between Wake, Midway, and the Marianas. So, obviously you're probably going to go for the Marianas. It's close to the home. You could also try Wake. Midway is a little bit tougher. It's going to be a little bit tougher to hold. The U.S. is actually closer to that one than you are. So yeah, just my recommendation for the early game is slowly build these 2 up, so that the Americans are going to have a hard time taking them back. If you're going to go for the Dutch East Indies, as opposed to using Formosa for a staging ground for your ships, which is pretty common, the problem with Formosa is you won't be able to get any planes into Java. It's actually going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 moves just to get onto that island. So you're not going to be able to land those planes afterwards, and you're not going to be able to bring any planes into Java. And obviously Java is going to be the toughest island to take. So instead of using Formosa as your staging ground for an invasion of the East Indies, I like to use C-Zone 88 here. Because you can get your planes to Java, and you're within 2 of each other island, and then you're 3 away from Dutch New Guinea here, which usually you're just going to send out a destroyer with a single infantry on it to take Dutch New Guinea anyway. It's not going to be defended in most cases. So you can reach all your islands, and you can do all that you need to do a lot more easily than if you staged outside of Formosa. Another reason that I don't like to go after the Dutch East Indies in the early game is because, as opposed to the Chinese, it gives the Americans 2d12 worth of income, which I don't often like to leave things up to luck. Obviously, this entire game is rolling dice, so there's a lot of luck involved. But 2d12 can be up to 24 IPPs for the American income, and the earlier you do that, the more money they're going to get, obviously, because there's going to be more turns of accrued income. And if you just go after the Chinese, it's just 5. It's $5 a turn, which is going to be, in the majority of cases, a lot better than what's going to happen if you go after the Dutch East Indies. So in short, the reason I like to go after China is because they do get stronger over time, as opposed to the Dutch East Indies, which stay kind of static. There's more territories with higher IPC values than in the Dutch East Indies, so more total money. There's a victory point in Nanking that you can start to get a really good hold on. And then obviously the American income stays probably lower earlier than if you were to go after the Dutch East Indies. Now, if you take my advice and invade China, You probably won't be attacking the Dutch East Indies before 1939, which is kind of where I've been cutting off these early game strategy videos. I generally get into the East Indies around early 40 or July of 40, which sometimes affects the Germans. You know, they can't, I recommend they don't attack the Netherlands until you get the Dutch East Indies. So generally I shoot for, you know, January or July of 1940 to get into the East Indies. That way I've got a really solid foothold in China and I can get most of these IPC territories with the ground units that I produce in the early turns. My first, you know, 3, 4, 5 turns of purchasing are only infantry and Marines. That way you build up a really, really solid base in China, a good force that it's going to be tough to dislodge you from, and you're going to be able to use all those ground forces throughout the entire game to eventually probably take the Philippines. That's a victory point. To take your Dutch East Indies, you're going to have plenty of ground troops. If you just spend the first, you know, 4 or 5 turns just absolutely loading up on ground forces, because Japan starts with a huge, awesome navy, but they don't have a ton of ground forces. So I like to use the early game to catch up on that. One final thing, the first turn, as always, we're going to be upgrading this Nagasaki factory down here up to a major to get that second tech roll. You can, I've seen a couple instances of building a major in Honshu. It's obviously going to be expensive. I'm going to be honest with you, I haven't decided if I think it's a good idea or not. It's truly up to you. I do feel that Japan usually doesn't get all the tech that it needs, so maybe building a factory in Honshu is a good idea. I personally never have. I do want to try it though. If anybody has any strong thoughts on that, let me know. I would love to hear them. One final thing before I let you go. Towards the end of the early game, so getting real close to July of 1939, which I consider the transition into the mid game, I do like to build a strategic bomber for Japan. Not for any sole purpose that I can tell you right now. Usually it ends up going to Calcutta and bombing Calcutta. But you could also, if you're feeling like it, you can bomb the crap out of the Anzac. So I just like to build a bomber just because I think they're useful. So whether it be for Calcutta or Sydney or any other purpose you find for it, you can buy some airbornes and take out some of the islands. Like you can drop an airborne into Midway or Wake right when you get to war with the Americans, and then start building militia and infantry in there remotely. So you can build your militia and then you can upgrade your militia as you build them. So yeah, I do like to get a strategic bomber out sometime around 1939, just because it's a really versatile tool. And that's all I got from you guys. Japan is probably one of my favorite major powers to play, just because it's action from the beginning if you invade China and all throughout the game. And their points are interesting and fun to get. And I love the aspect of having both a Navy game and a ground game and that huge Air Force. They're really a fun faction to play. Good luck to you guys, and I will see you later.